This podcast is a part of the Newhoff Media Podcast Network.
Good morning and welcome to Community Connection. We have with us today Matthew Stover. He is an author, and I told you on Wednesday that he would be here Thursday, but I told you the wrong date. Today's Friday. He's actually here with us today, and we are going to learn more about him and some great things. Matthew, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Laura. I'm happy to be here.
We were talking, so when I learned, was introduced to your name, I'm like, wait a minute. So, retiree from Danville Area Community College, and Mrs. Barbara Stover worked there, and so I asked you about her, and she is your mother.
That's correct. She started teaching at DJC in those days, 1965, the same year that we moved to Danville, and taught there until 85, I believe, when she retired.
Well, very, very, very beloved, and she's one of the Hall of Famers when you think about people at DJC, exactly as you said. And so I'm very happy to meet you, Matt. Again, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So tell us about growing. So you're an author. You're very well known. We're going to talk about some of the different books that you've written, but tell us about being from Danville and your time here.
Well, we moved to Danville in early 65. My birthday is at the end of January, and it was right after my third birthday, and the running gag from my dad at the time was that the house was my birthday present. We lived on Vermilion Street. I went to Roselawn through 6th grade, Northridge, DHS. Graduated. I took early graduation from DHS and went off to college at 17, and didn't come on a permanent basis until about 2013. So almost 10 years.
So tell me about what your interest in.
Well, I was always interested in writing. I mean, my mother's mother, who lived with us when I was, had been the head librarian, the Pocahontas city library, or town library in Iowa, where my mom was born. And mom, of course, was a teacher, professor of speech communication and rhetoric, and so there were a lot of books in our house. And my mom subscribed to a couple of mostly actual pulp literary magazine. She subscribed to Ellery Queen's Mystery Magazine, which I read religiously every month when it arrived. And in Ellery Queen, they had a feature that they called the Department of First Stories. And they made a point of every issue publishing the very first story by an unknown author. And when I made that connection at 12 or 13, I realized, wait, if I can just write a story and send it to them, and if they like it, they'll put it in this magazine that I've been reading my whole life. Okay, I'm in.
I love that. So did you actually write something for them?
Oh, of course. I didn't. They never bought any of my stories, but I submitted at least 4 or 5 before I graduated from high school.
What did your family think of your writing in those early days?
I never got any pushback at all on my writing. It was mostly a sort of private hobby for me. I was a drama club kid, and I went to college actually as a theater major, and worked as a professional actor in Chicago for a few years in the 80s. I was a performer, still am to some degree, but that was sort of my outward persona, I guess. The writing was just something that I just did for fun, for myself. And it continued to be entirely for fun even after I was trying to sell it, it took me many, many years to finally break into print. I was in my 30s before I sold my first book.
So we actually had Stuart Robbins on this week as well, and he was talking about conversations between the two of you, and he said that one of the things that you talked about when people ask, how do I get books published, is the rejection piece.
Mm-hmm. My first office, when I first began, for reasons I'm not going to go into here, I was forced to retire from show business, health reasons, and my wife at the time encouraged me to just try to make a little money on the side writing. So I got serious about it, started really working on stories, and I had my office at the time was a fairly large walk-in closet in our apartment in Chicago's East Village. And I papered my office walls in rejection slips. And it was something that I did just as a way of sort of, I don't know, asserting my own power, saying, look, I don't care how many people don't like me. I'm still doing this. But as I progressed as a writer, as I got better stuff, it was very interesting to watch you could track my progression as a writer in the size and content of the rejection slips as they worked their way around from this side of the door all the way around to the other side of the door. They went from little mimeographed rejection slips that were actually cut out of paper with a paper slicer so they could print, a dozen of them on every page. It started with those and ended with, we love your stuff. We're just full up right now. Please, and then, not long after that, I finally started selling, and I have, so far there is one piece of writing since those days that I have not yet published, but it's on its way.
Okay, well, let's take our first break and we'll be right back.
Danville's Talk Station. Danville's Talk Station. 1490 WDAN. Danville.
We are here with Matt Stover. He is an author. We were talking about his development and into becoming an author, and we were just getting ready to talk about your published work. So, what was the title of the first one?
Well, my first novel, my actual first published work was in a college literary magazine, which I was friends with the editors of, so I'm not sure that really counts, but it does. I mean, it does. So my first published work was a short story called The Peter Pan Conspiracy. But my first actual paid work that I got money for was a novel. It's called Iron Dawn. It came out in 96, I think, from Penguin Books, and promptly disappeared, as did the sequel that I wrote, which is called Jericho Moon. Most of my reputation outside of my tie-in work, the Star Wars stuff and things that I've done, actually rests on the other original series that I was working on even then, that's now called The Acts of Cain. And the first one of those came out in 98, and the most recent one in 2012, and the next one is in progress.
Very good. So how do you develop ideas, or what's your basis for, this might be a book?
Well, my personal process, I think, is a little idiosyncratic. It usually starts with a character that I think is interesting in some way, some quirk of their psychology, or it's not a biographical thing. It's just there's something I get interested in writing about a particular kind of person, and then I start thinking about, well, what sort of situations would I put this kind of person in that would enable them to show off what makes them interesting to me in a way that's going to be interesting to other people. And it usually just sort of balloons from there. It gets more and more complicated to the point where, because I write science fiction and fantasy, basically the creation of entire imaginary universes in which, that exist basically to show off what I think are the interesting parts of these characters.
So you see the characters in your mind. Have you actually had any of them made into like one of those 3D printers? Like, this is what my character looks like.
Well, not exactly. No. Several of them are depicted in various forms on covers of the books. Usually not entirely to my satisfaction, but whatever. There are some folks out there who have done some fan art, especially of my Star Wars books, but also of the Acts of Cain. And yeah, it's pretty exciting. I mean, it's always interesting to see what other people think my characters look like, because I don't generally describe them in very great detail. I'm a firm believer in one or two details and just let them make up the rest. And what they make up is often more interesting than what I had in mind in the first place.
I can definitely understand that. I love to read. I'm an avid reader. And, I love the process of reading because you do get to put yourself in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
You get to become a part of the story as you're there just watching it. And I can imagine with the writing process, it's kind of the same.
Well, it's similar. But I would like to point out the real difference between literature and, visual art, like film or play or whatever. In literature, you're not just watching a story. You're actually participating in the creation of the story. It's your imagination that is the stage on which all of these characters are running around. And all of them look the way they do because that's how you imagine them. And the way they sound is, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
It's all, your experience is at least half, if not more, you. The book is just there to kind of help your imagination come up with fun things to ponder.
Mm-hmm. So with sci-fi, you have to have a vivid imagination. Did it ever get you into trouble growing up?
Oh, always. It gets me into trouble now. I was not my hero. My hero when I was growing up, my sort of cultural role model was Spock, right? Because I was the bright kid, and I have an exceptional memory for details of trivia, things, essentially useless information. But, stuff like who guest starred in what episode of Gilligan's Island in 1967 or whatever. Yeah, I can remember these things. I always had a particular sort of self-imposed obsession with not making things up. Right, not pretending things were true, right? It's the Spock thing. It's the logic. It's the math. It's the how things work, and that sort of stuff. That's what was always interesting to me. Where I would get in trouble is when my imagination would run away with me a little bit in situations where I didn't fully understand. Right. And once you start down a kind of an idea about what's going on, if it's the wrong idea, you can end up in a lot of trouble. And I have from time to time.
Yeah. So with the Star Wars series, talk about your books.
Well, I never wanted to write for Star Wars. I mean, I didn't. I was approached a couple of times to do other tie-in work, and didn't want to. And when I was approached to do my first Star Wars book, I didn't want to do it. But a couple of writers, friends of mine, also who write for Star Wars, Mike Stackpole and Bob Salvatore, R.A. Salvatore, basically grabbed me at a convention and said, "What, you're thinking about not taking a Star Wars book? Are you insane? Do you have any idea how many people are going to read this book?" And when I stopped and thought about it, I was like, well, it is a chance to get in front of a much, much larger. My first Star Wars book outsold my first own personal book 20 or 30 to 1. It's they sell a ton of copies, and like many writers, my real ambition is to have a lot of people read my work, and so I jumped on it. It turned out well. It was my first book on the New York Times bestsellers list, and so they hired me to do 3 more, including the novelization for episode 3, which is my biggest selling book of my career so far.
Mm-hmm. Congratulations.
It's the one that one actually got me up on the Wall of Fame at DHS.
Oh, well, there you go.
There you go.
Well, Matt, you are just a joy to talk to, because as we're talking, we are actually seeing each other, so I can see your face and I can see the passion. And sometimes with radio, that's something you miss because you can't see the face and the everything that goes with that. So I really appreciate your art form. Let's take a real quick break because I want to come back, leave us some time at the end to talk about a few more things.
Danville's Talk Station. Danville's Talk Station. 1490 WDAN. Danville.
And welcome back to Community. We have Matt Stover here. He is an author. We've been talking about his Star Wars series. But Matt, it's almost like I can see your brain working as you're thinking this, because again, as someone that can visualize, I just really appreciate your art form, and I really appreciate the conversation and your willingness to talk with us about your books. And so now you're writing. I think maybe it's been a little bit. Stuart was saying maybe you've taken a little bit of a break, but you've jumped back into a series.
That's correct. Well, the break I took was imposed upon me. It was not willing. But I've been in basically semi-retirement for about 10 years. I've tried to work, have not been able to. Lately, my health has taken a dramatic better, and I am working again. And some of the I realized when I started diving back in, to a sort of headspace where I'm really thinking about work all the time, I realized that several of the projects that I had come up with and that I had been playing with while I was not fully competent are conceptually related and could be part of a larger project. And one of them is what will be the 5th book of the Acts of Cain. It's going to be the first book of this particular cycle of interlinked stories.
So you have your characters, and when you're writing, do you think I need to get a hold of this guy, whoever that character is? You still have these characters in your mind that you want more out of.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. But it's there's on that subject. It's very difficult for me to organize where I would even start. Let me start by saying that I don't base my characters on other people. My characters are all Basically, just like the people in your dreams, right? They're all you.
Yep.
Because it's your mind that's generating them. And my characters are all, versions of me that I like or dislike to certain degrees. Not versions of me. How do I put this? I don't have a better way of saying it, but that doesn't really capture what I'm trying to get at. It's the point is that these characters, all of them, even the fairly minor characters, exist in my head almost the same way that real people do, so that I can kind of check in with them, and I just know what they would be feeling about whatever circumstance I'm writing about right here. So if for example, I want to bring in somebody from Blade of Taishal, a minor character, and bring them back, I start thinking about them, and I know what they've been doing since the last time I wrote about them, and I know what kind of person they grew up to be, and it's all just sort of there. It's when it comes to the characters, anyway, I don't have to make a lot of notes. Just they feel like real people.
Yeah.
That writing down too many details about the sort of person they are is kind of like doing that about someone you know, because it's not really going to reflect who they are. They're always going to be more complicated than any way you come up with to describe them, because they're inside my head. They're kind of alive.
I get it.
And, yeah. Oh, sorry.
Nope, that's okay. But I get exactly what you're saying. So, Matt, we have a few minutes left. What else would you like to tell us?
Well, the only other thing, I guess, is because made this connection for us. I think I should mention Pulse and Echo, the literary magazine that Danville Public Library's writers group's putting out in cooperation with the library. We just had our first issue, and that issue contains the first 4,000 or 5,000 words of my new novel, and which is also now my first published fiction in 10 years. And it's kind of exciting.
Very much so. So how can we get that? If people are listening, how can they get a copy of that?
I believe that you can, I believe there are some copies available on like a complimentary basis in exchange for donations to the library, something like. I'm not sure what the details on it are, because I just wrote the story.
Yep, there you go. So you know what? The Danville Public Library, they know about it. When we had Stuart on the other day, he said people can definitely come into the library, ask for him, and they can learn more about it. So we can definitely get a hold of Stuart at the library.
Yep, absolutely. And I believe that it's available. There are electronic versions available online.
Okay, well, Matt, thank you so much. It's been very interesting. Thank you for being willing
My
to
pleasure.
share. And your characters and your explanations, I totally get what you're saying, because I can see it as you're talking. So thank you so much for that. And I hope, audience, you've learned a lot this week about some different great things that we have from Danville. And we hope you have a good weekend, and we will be back on Monday with more stories.
You've been listening to the Newhoff Media Podcast Network. For more, visit newhoffmedia.com. Hoffmedia.com. Hoffmedia.com.